Generative AI is a big deal right now, and to understand it better, I brought an expert, Mike Chambers, AI specialist developer advocate at AWS and AWS Machine Learning Hero. We will cover Gen AI roadmap, study materials, workshops, use cases, future trends, whether you need to learn math for Gen AI for open source, and more. Whether you know a lot about AWS but new to Gen AI, or you are just starting out, this episode will help your Gen AI journey. And we have a fun rapid fire round at the end. Mike, welcome to the show.
Raj, thank you so much for having me on the show. It's a pleasure to be here. Yeah, look, so my name's Mike Chambers, and I'm a developer advocate for Amazon Web Services. That's my day-to-day role, which basically means that I have the best job in the world. It's super, super exciting. And I specialize in generative AI, which means that doubly I've got the best job in the world. So yeah, basically I spend my time digging into the technology of, in this particular case, generative AI, seeing what the use cases are, playing around with it, and then reaching out to as many people as I can to listen. I spend a lot of my time listening. People will say that I also spend a lot of time talking, but I do also, I spend a lot of time listening to people with where they're currently up to on their journeys, so that we can just foster a community conversation around what's happening in this space. And then I work quite closely with service teams inside of AWS to make sure that we're taking that listening that we're doing and folding it back into the services that we provide. So yeah, that's me and what I do.
What are some of the use cases that you see comes up often? And more importantly, where do you think Gen AI is going in future?
Oh, that's a massive question to start with. Just tell us everything. So obviously, it's been around now. Well, it's actually been around for quite a long time. But in terms of just right at the forefront and sort of right in sight of everybody, it's been what, about a year and a half, something like that. Really, the launch of ChatGPT just thrust it right there into the public consciousness. So it's something which, as technologists, we've not really dealt with this kind of thing before, where often we have to sort of like champion the technology and go out to people and say, hey, you really should take a look at this. This is great. But in this case, and I'm sure most people watching this will have a similar experience, that it's actually the other way around. It's like everybody in my family uses generative AI. Like my dad uses generative AI. Like they don't know anything about the underlying technology, nor do they need to, but they get some value from it. So they're beating down our doors saying like, I want to build this into something. Actually, not so much my dad. He doesn't ask me to develop software for him, but you know what I'm saying? Like everybody in the enterprise structure, for example, are coming through saying, please, we want to integrate this, we want to integrate this into this, that, and the other. So unprecedented times. So where I see this being used, I like to sort of see it this way. So with in IT generally, what is the overarching problem that we're trying to solve is that we have users on one side, and those users want to get access to data. So broadly speaking, that's pretty much everything that we do is we connect users to data. And I think in the middle, then we have all this sort of like the solution space, and generative AI sits inside of here in a number of different ways, which I think is really interesting. The primary one, let's just talk about this first off. The primary place where currently generative AI is showing massive amounts of value is in productivity for software developers. So this is coding assistance. If you write code, even if you're not a developer, I don't classify myself as a developer because I'm not, but I whack scripts together. I build quick and dirty solutions. I get things up and running. For me, it's absolutely perfect to be able to use things like Amazon Q Developer as a plugin for my console, for my IDE, to be able to much more rapidly develop code. I mean, I don't know if you've been playing around with this. I've been using it since Code Whisperer times, and just using LLMs in general, actually, as well. I can also just throw questions into things like Claude and just get it to give me answers to challenging programming concepts that I have. So That is a huge place, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when we're trying to connect our users to data, the developer sits in the middle writing some applications. They can be so much more productive with these tools. And that's a thing that is happening right now. I think when people looked at generative AI and saw its potential a couple of years ago, people maybe of thinking, well, this is going to revolutionize creative industries and things like this. That might happen. But what is happening right now is it's our own industry which is being revolutionized by this. And so its ability to make us so much more productive in everything that we're doing in writing code. So that's the first part. And I think that's the sort of the elephant in the room. Everybody really should be taking a look at this kind of use case. But that doesn't really require you to know anything about generative AI because they're tools. They're tools that help you become more efficient. And I often say this, like if Amazon Q, now it's not, but if Amazon Q was powered by a warehouse full of monkeys typing on keyboards,
Mm-hmm.
and I still managed to get the same kind of output from it, then I would take that. That'd be great. I don't need to know what's happening under the hood. It's not that's not the architecture. I'm reliably informed, but it's all about making you more efficient, and really those tools should just slot right into your workflow. And it doesn't matter whether it's generative AI or not,
Right.
but it just happens to be that it is. So the other part to generative AI in terms of this stack, again, connecting our users to this data, is how a developer can use generative AI capabilities inside of their application stack to enhance the way that the application works. And this is the kind of stuff that we're really still scratching the surface of this in terms of what's possible. And this is what this really excites me. And there's so much that you can talk about here. So I guess the top level stuff that many of us will have seen this kind of thing is to create a chatbot. So now why? I think the question that I think is really interesting here is, why is that interesting? Why is that a thing? So it's taking non-deterministic inputs. In other words, a chat message or something that someone has written on a keyboard. They could type anything, and we want to be able to understand that and process that in some way. So it's a non-deterministic input. Yeah, it's textual language, but apart from that. And then we want to map that to some kind of output, but we have no idea what output that is yet, because we haven't processed that data. So in a very simple way, the chatbot can take this non-deterministic input from the user and then sort of do something, perform some kind of magic, which can then generate an answer. Now, obviously, we need to unpack magic. We can't leave it at that. But it allows you to do that. And it allows us to, through the natural language understanding of something like a large language model, it can help us tap into vast quantities of data that we haven't been able to do before. So go and have a look at a few years ago, or today for that matter, a user connects to this application and the application connects to a SQL database. So that all of the data inside of there is fully structured data. We know where it is, we know how to query it. It's fairly straightforward to do, right? So we can write some SQL queries and we can get that data out. But it limits us to, we can only get the data that's inside of this database. What about all other data? What about all this unstructured data that lives in the world? Well, with a large language model powered application, if this other data that we're talking about is language data that sits somewhere, then we can get that large language model to read and look at that data. And so we've just massively expanded the amount of data that we can connect those users to. That's really sort of a little bit deeper than just a chatbot, but that's kind of why chatbots maybe are kind of exciting, is because it opens up all of these kinds of possibilities as well. And I think once you start to sort of think about it in those terms, it's not just adding a chat interface to something that we already had, but it's actually what that language model can do internally to be able to connect to all of that missing data that was out there in the world. Fascinating stuff.
Talking about chatbot, can you tell the viewers how the chatbot today is different than the previous generation. Like 3 years ago, someone could have created a chatbot using Amazon Lex, right?
Mhm.
So how is this chatbot more powerful than the traditional chatbot that was existing before?
Yeah. Okay. So a lot of this is about scale, right?
Mm,
So at some level, it's quite similar, right? So obviously the modality is similar. Like we approach the chatbot, we type something
mhm,
in. In the past, what's happened is that we've trained machine learning models in
mhm,
the background of services like Lex
mm,
that are looking for the intent of the message and being able to extract entities from that message and things like that. So in those general use cases, we have to train a machine learning model, or the service would do it for you. And it would then be sort of narrowly focused on just that. And if you
mhm,
then talked about something outside of that use case, it starts to fall apart a little bit, and you have
mhm,
to spend a
mhm,
lot of time sort of doing all of the edge cases. What's happened with the large language models that we're using? Well, so this is the change, is the large language model.
right.
So generative AI, most of the value that we're seeing being derived from generative AI today is through large language models. So these general purpose machine learning models, which have been trained on astronomical amounts of data, like
Mhm,
so much data. And they've learned sort of natural language. They learn how language is put together.
mm,
But beyond that, they start to have these other capabilities where they sort of understand a little bit about the way the world works as well.
mm,
Um, so they have this base level knowledge. They are actually intelligent. They're
mhm,
not conscious, and they're not alive or anything like that, but they do have a level of intelligence. And so we
mhm,
can take this huge model and we can apply it to these general purpose tasks, such as chatbot. And so it means that as a developer, we can put together a chatbot um, much easier, much more simple, simpler in a much simpler way
mhm,
than we
mhm,
could before, because we don't have to be so specific about all the different particular kinds of scenarios that they might face. So
mhm,
we can ask a chatbot and almost anything, and with careful prompting, we can get a valid answer that comes back, even if that answer is I can't help you with that right now,
right,
but
right.
it can extract all that kind of stuff. So that's really sort of why it's so different. That's the
Mhm,
sea change which has happened, is we now have access to these huge general purpose language understanding models, which is the
mhm.
LLM.
Excellent. But you think in the future, the biggest area where LLM will help the most is the developer experience, speed up the development process, unit testing, debugging, explaining, all that stuff.
Well, I mean, that's happening now, right? So
Right.
that's a very much a now thing.
Mm-hmm.
And it's almost like the first big advance that we're taking by using these tools is
Mm-hmm.
for ourselves in our own product development. I think if you look towards the future,
Mm-hmm.
then well, it's very difficult to predict the future.
Right.
I've tried to do this a number of times, and I kind of get it right. But what we're seeing now is workflows that use the power of the large language model to automate workflow, essentially, to automate mundane tasks, things
Mm-hmm.
that which are too tricky for an if-else statement to do inside of your
Right.
code, but nevertheless are repeated tasks that we just need to get this done. So, so a couple of things. A lot of value being derived from just crawling over lots of documents and summarizing them, doing that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It's not sexy, but something, it's got to be done, or we want to do it, or
Right.
we can get value from doing it. And so even in terms of generative AI workflows, this is
Mm-hmm.
relatively straightforward, but there's a lot to be done here. So again, remember how we were connecting our users to our data. We're able to connect to a lot more data, and it's not just that it's unstructured, but it's just there's just so much of it. So we
Mm-hmm.
can now connect our business processes or our application processes, whatever they are, into this data by summarizing it, by extracting information and knowledge about it, by putting some structure to it so that we can then use it in the rest of the application flow. So there's a lot about that. That is the sort of the thing that people are doing right now. Then the next thing, which is happening now. But the next
Mm-hmm.
thing is what we'd call agentic workflows and using agents. And this is where we're using the intelligence of the model to be able to look at an incoming request
Mm-hmm.
and then break that down and say, okay, well, how can I respond to this? What do I need in order to be able to respond for this? So it sets out a set of actions potentially, and then starts to reason about what it should do. It feels kind of magical. I mean,
Yes.
if you peel back the layers, you can understand basically how this is working. But it is using its intelligence then to start routing calls after different things, and how am I going to problem solve my way through this? And so the agents part of this agentic workflow is that we give it agency by giving it access to tools which connect into the outside world. So a lot of the early stuff that we did with large language models was to just ask the model to respond using the data that it already had inside of it, which is, it's fun to start with, but you kind of reach the limits of that pretty quickly. Then we sort of connect in with other data sets. Retrieval augmented generation is an architecture for this. And that actually technically is a sort of agentic workflow. Then we connect it into tools that can go and do something. So go and launch a firework, go and book me a flight, go and send an email, and reach out into the outside world. And so these agentic workflows can end up being pretty sophisticated, breaking down this into this request which has come in, and then working through the tools that it has available to it to go and do something. This is really exciting. And I think we're really, a lot of people are spending a lot of time working on this, but I would say we're early days on this. And this is just going to build and build and build. So there's a little bit of a future gaze.
I was playing around with agents, especially the travel use case. Like I told the agent, hey, I want to go on a vacation. My budget is this. Go do this. And it just searched all the vacation places, got the flight prices. And if I wanted, it was ready to go and book the flight and hotel just from one command.
Yeah. So one of the things that tools helps us to do, and you can sort of lump in retrieval augmented generation into this conversation as well, which I guess we haven't dug into that, but that is connecting the large language model powered application into an authoritative data source, your data source. So not something that the model itself needs to know, but it needs to know how to look it up. We can dive into that in a huge amount of detail if you wish. So that's really powerful. And one of the reasons why this is so useful is because it gets us away from this concept of the hallucination, which I think is a little bit of an unfair term, but we probably understand, broadly speaking, what this is. This is where we send a request or a prompt to a large language model or any generative AI model. And then it responds in a way which looks good, looks right, but actually turns out to be factually incorrect, for example. So we ask it, and this is the one I like to do. I like to ask large language models, who's Mike Chambers? And they never know, because information about me has not been sort of inside of the training data for these models. So it makes something up that sounds usually quite fanciful and kind of cool, but it's not me. So if you want to find out about me or whatever else, a topic which it doesn't specifically know about, then you can provide it with a tool to be able to go and do a search somewhere and into a database or into a repository of documents or whatever it is that might know the answer to that question. And so kind of reason why I'm raising this is, so if you have a go with PartyRock is super, super cool. So you mentioned that PartyRock is it's a totally free development environment of sorts that you can use to create generative AI powered applications using large language models and using image generation models. You can basically, just with a few lines of natural language yourself, you can end up with an application where you can generate recipes and trip planners, and then you can even have chats with it, and you can chat with it as well. Under the hood of that are these large language models. Currently, and last time I looked at it anyway, they don't actually have connections into any tools that go outside of that area. But some people have absolutely made applications that look like they do. And so you just have to be, it's all about this careful, slowly walking forward, figuring out what these tools are doing and what they're not doing, what large language models can do, what they can't do, what they'll say they can do versus what they can't do. This is the immense learning opportunity that we all have. So a friend of mine actually built an outfit recommender inside of
Yes.
PartyRock.
Yeah. Yeah.
Cool idea. Cool idea. So you could go in there and say, like, I'm in this location. So based off the weather where I am, like, what should I be wearing? Something along those lines. And, you know, the large language model is perfectly happy to say, well, you're in Brisbane, Australia, which is where I am.
Right.
You're in Brisbane, Australia. The weather currently is this. You should be wearing this. And you go, whoa, hang on a second. Hang on a second. You just need to go back and have a look at the prompting and behind the scenes. It doesn't actually know what the weather is like.
Oh,
The
wow.
large language model has a pretty good idea of what the weather might be like because I live in subtropical Queensland, and apparently right now it's really cold for some reason, but because of the time of year. But look, large language models don't know what time it is. They don't know about what the weather's like. They don't know any sort of current data. They can't. There's no reason why they should know that stuff. But what you can do is you can link it into tools to give you that access.
Right.
And so off the back of my friend making this application, I was like, let me show you. And so I jumped into Amazon Bedrock.
Yeah.
So Amazon Bedrock is essentially the AWS service which powers PartyRock. And so you jump into the AWS console, you can enable access to a whole list of different AI, generative AI models, LLMs, and other models from leading providers, not just AWS, but from other providers too. So Anthropic and Cohere and Meta, and the list goes on. And with those, you can start to really create quite sophisticated applications. As part of that service, there are a couple of other bits and pieces too. So a lot of people will know that it sort of gives you access to all of these models that you can basically build into your own code. But there are also these other pieces too. So we've got knowledge base, which is a fully managed retrieval augmented generation, or RAG workflow. Just makes it so easy.
I love the new knowledge base. Yeah.
I actually wrote I wrote a knowledge base. I wrote a retrieval augmented generation from scratch in my own code. It's so much more difficult to do that than it is just to use this service. And the thing I wrote was very very toy. But you can do it at proper scale with knowledge base. And so there's no, I would never do it any other way. Anyway, so there's that. There's also agents, which is obviously where I was getting to. So there's agents for Amazon Bedrock is part of the service, and it makes it really easy to do these agentic workflows. So we jumped into there, and I created a tool, or an action as they call it inside of agents for Amazon Bedrock. I created an action which would actually link to a weather service, which would actually link to a time service, so we know what time it is in the particular time zone you're in. Very easy to do, just a couple of Lambda functions, push all of that together into an agent, and now all of a sudden you actually can chat with, I'm in Brisbane, Australia. I'm thinking of doing this afternoon. What should I wear? And it would then go and look at what the time is, where I am, do some location services, look up the weather, and actually be able to respond with some information. So it's all totally doable. And the opportunity here is for us to sort of to learn these workflows and to learn what works and how we can put all these tools together to make these. Honestly, it brings me a lot of joy. You can probably tell. But yeah, I love doing this stuff. It's awesome.
Excellent. Well, this is a good segue, because next, talk about learning. Okay. So let's say someone who has been in IT, maybe know a little bit of AWS, right? How can they go about learning this Gen AI behemoth? Like, how can they think logically and then jump into this?
Yeah, sure. Look, so first of all, huge topic. So if you're looking at it going, whoa, where do I even start? Perfectly understandable. And I think having some idea about where you want to get to, right? So there's lots of different ways you can slice this topic up. You can, if you work as a full stack developer, then there are some tools and there's some skills that you should probably know about in order to be able to combine generative AI into your application stack understand a little bit about how that's working under the hood, but
Mm-hmm.
just get on with shipping code because that's what you want to do. And
Right.
so there's a track you could go down there. Um, Maybe completely the other end of a spectrum. You might want to train your own large language models.
Mm.
Huge job. It's not a weekend, it's not a rainy weekend activity, this.
Mm-hmm.
But if you want to understand how that works, then there's that end of the spectrum too. And then sort of in the middle is where I sort of focus at this sort of AI engineering stuff, which is
Right.
where I want to help full stack developers to achieve the outcomes they want. I want to be able to take what those deep laboratories essentially have built in terms of
Mm-hmm.
their models and sort of work in this sort of middle section here. And that's where I end up spending most of my time, if I'm honest. So first of all, just
Yeah.
that acknowledgement of that, the fact that this is a huge topic area.
Yeah.
The first thing that I would recommend, and this is pretty much for anybody at any level of this spectrum, is just immerse yourself in the technology. Just use it. And so every day, I use generative AI powered up tools like Q, for example, we talked about
Mm-hmm.
before. So Q Developer in my IDE. So yes, I did say before that you don't need to know how generative AI works, but you start to pick up on the kinds of things that generative AI can do and what it works
Mm-hmm.
well at and where
Mm-hmm.
maybe it doesn't work so well. So use that. Use chatbots. I use ChatGPT. I use Claude, and I use Amazon Bedrock's got a chat facility in there as
Mm-hmm.
well. Ask it questions, get it to help you do things in a day-to-day. I'm imagining that a lot of people watching this would already be doing that.
Yeah.
What I'm
Mm-hmm.
here to tell you is that's the right thing to do. It really starts to set you apart from others
Mm-hmm.
because it means that you are starting to get that intuitive sense of what this technology is actually capable of doing. So
Mm-hmm.
there's where I would start. From there, now I think that for a lot of us, interacting with these models through an API is probably the right way to go. It's
Mm-hmm.
certainly not a bad way to start. And if that starts to fall short of what you really need, then you've got
Mm-hmm.
a great basis to say why and what you can do to sort of go and do something else. So start to take a look at the APIs that are available. So that you can start to build that into application stacks. I mean, look, whenever you're learning anything new, if you
Mm-hmm.
can have pet projects that you're working on, that is almost irreplaceable. That's how you're going to learn
Right.
so much, by problem solving because you're passionate about a particular thing. So if you have an area of interest,
Mm-hmm.
start to think about how you can actually build little project applications that you
Mm-hmm.
can use the technology and play around with it. You learn so much through doing stuff like that. And so I would absolutely point you in the direction of the API for Amazon Bedrock,
Mm-hmm.
because it gives you access to so many things that we haven't even had time to go into here,
Mm-hmm.
through a single API endpoint, and you can just go and use that. So I would definitely encourage people to do that. Yeah, that's where I would start. Outside of that, yeah, there are definitely places you can follow courses and the rest of it. We can
Mm-hmm.
talk about that too. But
Yeah.
just if you have a passion for it, just scratch that itch and just go and start to build pet projects with this technology.
Excellent. And then in the bedrock, Mike, any specific area you think that should focus a little bit more? We talked about RAG a little bit. We talked about agents. We talked about integrating with Lambda. Now we have a new Converse API.
Yeah, interesting. Look, I think, yeah, starting out with the Converse API is probably not a bad place to go. So the Converse API is very new, actually, as we're recording this, and it abstracts you away from some of the differences between the providers, but it gives you access to some of the most performant models that are inside of Amazon Bedrock, and it means that you can get to shippable code a little bit quicker through that.
Right.
It also uses what I would call a sort of contemporary kind of messaging structure, which sounds, I don't know why did I say that, but it basically it's doing the sort of the modern way of, say, modern. We've been doing this for a year and a half.
For a year and a half, yeah.
But the way that we can interact with the model through a messaging structure, and if you take a look at the documentation, it becomes very clear very quickly what that means. Previous generations of models didn't necessarily use that, and so there's definitely use cases for those still, but it's a slightly different way of
Yeah.
working with it. So if we're just starting out, which is what the question was,
Right.
then yeah, take a look at the Converse API, and just start to play around with that, just throwing your prompts in, and maybe a system prompt or two, and getting some generations back, starting to see how you could build it into your application stack. But here's the thing. Don't necessarily jump to creating a chatbot.
Mm,
Chatbots are fine, but you will spend a bunch of time just hooking up all the sort of the minutiae of actually getting the
mm-hmm.
chatbot thing working, and people will bring along with their Streamlit applications and everything. A lot of fun, and play around with that potentially, but don't necessarily have that as your target state. Remember that these large language models, they have this language understanding,
Mm-hmm.
and so they're going to be able to help you do things like extracting information from documents,
Mm-hmm.
extracting, doing sentiment analysis, all kinds of different things that you can do. So maybe look at some of those data sets that you have that previously you didn't necessarily see as a data set because it was
Mm-hmm.
just a bunch of documents, and start to think about how you can just do some data processing stuff on that,
Mm-hmm.
extract some value from that. Not necessarily quite as sexy, but it's where a whole ton of value is, and it'll sort of set you apart from everybody else who's currently just chatbot, 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 chatbot. So yeah.
Excellent. So on that note, Mike, do you have any recommended workshop or course material? I can put everything on the description. If you can talk
Of
about
course.
that.
Yeah, of course. Look, I've got a couple of code repositories that I can share with you.
Okay.
So the first code repository I just mentioned, which I hadn't thought of before we started this conversation, but that's the that outfit
Picker.
project that I
Yeah.
mentioned before. Actually have that available as a GitHub repo, so I can share that with you, so you could take a look at that. So
Yes.
that's using that simple agentic workflow. Another one we have, which I am super proud of this one. It's a lot of fun. Is actually using agents to play Minecraft.
Wow.
So yeah, so
I
it's
gotta
actually
try
using agent.
that.
Yeah, it's using agents for Amazon Bedrock with a methodology they have inside of there called return control. And basically what you can end up with is you're playing Minecraft,
Mm-hmm.
and then we have this bot, which is actually just another player inside of Minecraft, and you can converse with them, and you can ask them to do things, and they'll dig holes, and they'll build structures, and they'll go
Wow.
find things, and you could say, go find a sheep, and it will go and find a sheep. And it's a early-ish days. Like, it works pretty well, and
Mm-hmm.
it's getting better all the time. Spending a lot of time sort of making that even better all the time. That's a lot of fun. So I'll share that repository with you as well.
Mm-hmm.
But more on the sort of the hand-holding sort of course
Right.
kind of perspective. So I do have a course. It's on deep learning AI.
Okay.
So Andrew Ng has, who is a luminary in the space of machine learning education. So founder of Coursera, he has this company, Deep Learning AI,
Right.
and we've worked with him on a number of different courses, or a number of different courses. The first one I'll mention is a short course. So this is, I don't know how long did it take, about an hour to go through all of the content.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you could spend a little bit longer if you wanted to. I'd maybe encourage you to do so. That goes into Amazon Bedrock specifically, actually gives you an AWS environment as part of that course. So yeah, it's a free course, and it's a free AWS environment for you to be able to go in and experiment around with Amazon Bedrock. So that's a course that I put together, and it steps you through serverless architectures
Yeah.
with Amazon Bedrock. So not creating a chatbot. And again, I'm going to encourage you to look beyond the chatbot
Mm-hmm.
sometimes. So that's that course. So you can definitely pop a link for that one. And then if you want to go deeper,
Yeah.
and there are some people in the world who will want to, and I'm one of those people, learning under the covers how something like a large language model works is actually kind of useful, because you start to get even more of a sense of, why, when I prompted it with this,
Mm-hmm.
it didn't necessarily do what I was thinking it would do.
Mm-hmm.
Why
Mm-hmm.
might that be? How can I improve that? How can I really dive deep on prompt engineering? How can I understand how the architecture of the model is actually working? And so again, on deep learning AI, I'm with our friends at Deep Learning AI. We have this course, which is an in-depth look at the
Yeah.
large language model. It was one of the first courses actually to be published last year on this topic, and is hugely successful. And so, yeah, definitely point people in the direction of having a look at that. Again, if you want to dive deeper, there's lots to
Yeah.
do before getting to that level. But yeah,
No,
take a
I
look
have
at that.
done both of those courses and they are excellent. Highly recommend. I'll give the link in the description. On that note, Mike, so let's say someone is trying to learn Gen AI on
Mm,
the open source area, right? So
yeah,
maybe they're like, okay, I want to learn this thing and I want to be able to carry my knowledge to multiple cloud providers or even just using open source technologies. Do you have
for
any
sure.
suggestion what tools to learn in that area?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, so in this space, so model providers, there are
Yeah.
multiple model providers out there who've just come out with awesome, highly capable models.
Mm-hmm.
But there are a few providers out there who have made the model weights available. And so open weights models, you might call them.
Mm-hmm.
And so you can download the weights onto your own machine. If you've got enough space, they are quite large. So in particular, you've got things like the Llama models from Meta,
Yeah.
more specifically the Llama 3 model, which was
Mhm.
just a couple of months ago came out. Then you've got Mistral, and you've got Mistral 7B and the Mixtral models that they came out with as
Mhm.
well, which again, the model weights are available. So you are free to basically take those and run them yourself. The challenge is getting the infrastructure together to do it. And
Right.
you can do that in AWS, no problem. You can go over to SageMaker, go to Jumpstart, you can click a couple of buttons and you'll be up and running.
Mhm.
Um, but honestly, like why if what you're trying to do is to sort of like learn and understand these things a little bit more and play around,
Mhm.
then don't go that direction. Go and take a look at Olama. So Olama is itself an open source project,
Mm.
and it's I think it runs on Mac OS on your
Mm.
actual machine. I think they have a preview version for Windows currently available, and it allows you to run these models on your own machine. How is this
Wow.
possible?
How is
How
this
is it possible? I
possible?
mean,
Yeah.
my laptop's not that big. Well, so what they've done, and what the people behind the project and are working on the project do, is they take these models with the open weights and they basically compress them. They make them smaller. They quantize
Mm.
them. So the model performance isn't quite what you'd expect from the full
Mhm.
scale version, but it's still pretty good. And you can run it on your own machine, and once you've downloaded it, it's there, it's free. You just keep smashing away at it. So a little bit slower, not necessarily quite as intelligent,
Mhm.
but you can start to just do chat sessions and prompt it and stuff.
Right.
You can also hook it into your own code as well and connect to it via a local API on your own machine. So that's a real fun way to be able to use free resources, so totally free
Mhm.
resources, to start playing around with very capable large language models. So that's definitely worth checking out.
Yeah, and even for the RAG, there are open source tools available, right? For the vector database, we can use Pinecone, we can use
Yeah.
LangChain and instrument it all together if someone wants to stick to just open source, and then they could run that on EC2. I have one customer who is training model on EKS, on Kubernetes, basically using RAG cluster, but those are like heavy
Sure.
infrastructure consumer, else they're not cheap.
No, for sure. Oh, look, training your own large language model is something you need to think really carefully about.
Mm-hmm,
Even potentially doing continuation training, which is a form of fine tuning that you can do on the model. Again, you should
mm-hmm.
think very carefully about it. So just walking through the progression here, and
Yes.
I want to get back to the open source stuff that you were talking about a minute
Mm-hmm,
ago, because that's important too. But when you come to work on a project, using a foundation model, so in other words, one of these big models that's been written by someone else or being created by someone
mm-hmm.
else, that's where most of us will start.
Right.
Um, you can then craft a prompt which is going to encourage the model to be able to respond with what it is that you're looking for.
Right.
You can insert your own data into the prompt. You can do all kinds of different things. working on that prompt and refining that prompt is definitely worthwhile and is something you should focus on. If it's not performing the way you want it to perform, have a look at the prompt and just look to see about ways that you can manipulate that prompt. It's far, far cheaper to edit a text file than it is to train a machine learning model, honestly, obviously.
Yes.
So definitely look at doing that. Beyond that, then, if you're still not getting the outputs that you want, can you use some sort of tooling? Can you use retrieval augmented generation to connect it in with data sources that it didn't have or doesn't have? That's definitely the next step in the continuation here. If you're still not getting the generations you want, then you can look at doing some fine tuning. And so not even continuation training, some just throw a few data sets in its way and see if you can massage it a little bit. And so something like Amazon Bedrock allows you to be able to fine tune models through an API endpoint, makes it super easy to do. You can also do continuation training, which is basically just a heavier version of the same thing. All of that, you should look at all of that and several times over before training your own model. Obviously, at AWS, we have a broad spectrum of customers, and we have some customers that are doing some amazing, really big stuff, such as it sounds like the customer you're working with there. And the infrastructure is there for you to do that as well. But just tread carefully into that. And once you've got the expertise and the reason to do it, then sure. There's a number of different ways that you can spin up a lot of infrastructure and train your own models as well. So yeah, it's fun times. But like I said, we'll continue to say, training a model, it's not, you know what, I'm not doing anything else this weekend. I think I'll train myself a large language model. That's not a thing, okay? We're talking big projects here.
No, I love the flow. So basically, learn the prompt engineering first, try it, and then dive deeper, do the RAG stuff, and then if you need, then do the fine-tuning part. So Mike, on that note, right, so there are two different kinds of job family. One is the AI ML folks who are working as data scientists or working as the data engineer. And then the other side, we have, let's say, solutions architect like myself, or like cloud engineer, DevOps engineer. Do you think in future, all these roles, they should all know parts of the Gen AI, but based on the roles, things will change? Any insight on it? Like solutions architect like myself, do I need to learn under the hood, like how these models are created and stuff? Or should I just be learning more on the prompt and the RAG and agent side?
Yeah, let's compromise in the middle a little bit somewhere, right? So I think it is really useful for people who are using using API endpoints to prompt models and to get them working, to still have a high level sense, an intuitive sense about how the model's working, because it means that you're going to be able to do your prompt engineering that much more effectively, because you'll realize when you're going the wrong direction. Look, so the other day I was talking to someone who was doing who was using retrieval augmented generation. What they wanted to do was they wanted to gather insights from log files from one of the AWS services as it happens. And so they were taking all of these log files and they were putting them inside of an S3 bucket. They were sending it into knowledge base, and it wasn't working. And it's like, well, why is this not working? Why am I not getting the output I want? And there is a solid reason for that. And the reason is because that's not really the way that retrieval augmented generation works. If you're wanting to, review a massive table of data and do some summarization and stuff, well, there's probably like data warehouses and SQL and all kinds of other ways that you would actually get that answer out. A large language model isn't necessarily what you want, and RAG is not what you want. So side note, RAG is going to be really good at, you throw in lots of text documents for you to be able to grab answers from that. That's what RAG's about. If you've got log files, that's not what RAG's about. So so the problem there was just having not quite understanding the flow of how this stuff works. It's like, let's not see it like as a magic box where I throw data in and this cool stuff happens, although that does happen. Let's understand a little bit about what's happening under the hood so that we can start to help ourselves out of these problems and maybe guide ourselves architecturally somewhere different. So I think that's kind of important. The role which I see being formed, and this is, do some Google searching on this, you'll find it all over the place now, is AI engineer. Now, that is a term that was used probably 5-6 years ago and meant something different. What's happened now is that because of the term generative AI, the term AI itself as a machine learning engineer or as a data scientist, we don't own that term anymore. That term now belongs to the whole world because everybody starts talking about AI when
Right.
they mean a whole bunch of different things, and that's fine, right? This is cool. This means that we've got this critical mass of conversation. So I'm going to accept that. And so AI now basically means generative AI and
Mm-hmm.
AI engineering as a term and as a discipline. It's essentially taking a bunch of core skill sets which are around the concepts that we've been talking about here in relation to using generative AI. So how do you do the prompt engineering? That's part of generative AI
Mm-hmm.
engineering. How do you select the right model? So there are different models with different kinds of capabilities. How do you know which ones to choose? So model evaluation is a thing that's in
Mm-hmm.
there. Understanding the architectural flows of things like retrieval augmented generation,
Mm-hmm.
where they work, where they don't work, tools and agentic workflows is part of AI engineering. Things like fine tuning, what it is. So you might go and use an API endpoint, and that's the easiest way to do it. But just
Right.
understand what is it then doing on your behalf.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Having a sense of that, which is something that you'd be able to get from that course that we mentioned before. And then continuation training. How is it different to fine tuning? These kinds of things. These are the kinds of things that an AI engineer would have in their tool bag. Now, it's true that there are some roles that are now popping up being advertised for, which are for AI engineers, which at their
Mm-hmm.
core would be for someone who knows that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then in addition to that, on the fringes there, you've got your full stack developer we've talked about before.
Right.
I'm going to say it to you. If you're a full stack developer last year, you're only still a full stack developer this year if you've got some of those things in your kit bag, right? So you
Yes.
know how to do prompt engineering and model selection. Just in the same way that you know how to do SQL queries and you know which
Right.
database to choose, it's the same kind of thing, same kind of level. You don't have to be a DBA to be a
Mm-hmm.
full stack engineer, but you do need to understand how SQL queries work, right?
Yes.
So in a
Yes.
similar
Yeah.
kind of way, you should know about why different prompts work in different ways and sort of a sense of how these models work. And the same thing for architects as well. So for a solution architect, is retrieval augmented generation the right solution here?
Mm-hmm.
Is something else? Like, where are we going to get the pitfalls? So there's those AI engineering capabilities are in there as well. So yeah, all centering around this sort of new term that's
Mm-hmm.
new as in the last 18 months or so of AI engineer.
Fun fact, like 9 years back, I tried to get into AI ML, but then I'm like, okay, there's a lot of math, right? I was trying to understand the random forest, the classification, the all
Mhm.
those things. I'm like, okay, this is like little too math, little bit more theoretical than my test. Is Gen AI, is it the same requirement? Do people need to learn a lot of math or they can get away with some of that stuff?
Yeah, basically everybody needs to go and get a PhD in mathematics, otherwise they've got
Oh,
no,
man.
of course not, of course not. No, look, so look, and honestly, that's sort of been the way with machine learning before as well. I remember when I first got into machine learning, and it was
Mhm.
via request. Like someone was like, "Can you do this?" And I was like, "Well, never looked at that stuff before." So the first thing I did is went to Google. I started looking at machine learning, and it's like, oh,
Yeah.
my head hurts, and I haven't
Yes.
no. And so you're looking at a lot of mathematical notation.
Hmm.
They love that stuff. Now, you don't even really need that with machine learning either. Like there is a level at which you do, but there's a level which you don't, because you
Hmm.
basically just come and use the pre-existing models, for example,
Hmm.
things like that you can do. And with generative AI, it's the same, right? So um, uh, yeah, the underlying core of all of this is this vastly complex, in some ways. In some ways it's complex, in some ways it's really beautifully simple, but
Mm.
it's this transformer architecture. You don't have to understand how that works in order to
Hmm.
actually be able to make use of this technology. So look, it's been abstracted all the way up to an API endpoint. If all you want to do is send in a prompt, get something back, then
Hmm.
good. I would encourage you to go a bit deeper than that, but you do not need deep level, any mathematics actually,
Okay.
in order to be able to make sense of this. Everything is language based. Actually, this is one of the exciting things about this.
Mm,
If you look last year, I mean, there's so many white papers coming out all the time,
right.
and I imagine most people don't read white papers, and I didn't used to either, but I do now,
Mhm,
because a lot of them is just talking about how to use large
mhm,
language models and how to use generative AI models. And if you look last year at a lot, not all of them, but a lot of the significant things that came out that changed the direction of how we use this technology,
mhm.
it was all language based stuff,
True.
right? So it was like, let's paraphrase a few of them down into, I just figured out that if I ask the model in this way, it's
Mhm,
better than it was before. And
right.
that then is like this huge change in how we use models. So like thinking through step by step is a great example of this. Just by saying to the model,
Yeah.
first think through this step by step, list out a set of actions, and then do something. Even if
Yeah.
it's not using tools, by the way, it can make the output that much more that much better. And so anybody who's got a grasp of natural language,
Mhm.
which probably by very definition is anybody who's
Everyone.
still listening to this video now,
Right.
otherwise it's just white noise.
Yeah.
So anybody who's got a grasp of natural language has a chance of being that person who will find the next big thing in generative AI to be able to
Mhm,
get it to do something that we didn't think of that before. So it's really democratized the whole subject here. So far from needing to know lots of maths and stuff,
mhm.
just having a persuasive language can get you maybe into groundbreaking territory with generative AI. I think that's
Yeah,
really
yeah, I
exciting.
agree. I agree. So, Mike, what's the craziest Gen AI use case you have come across? Or what's the craziest use case you just starting to see and you were like, wow, this is next level?
Well, I mean, gosh, that's an interesting question. So I mean, obviously, using Minecraft, using Amazon Bedrock to
That's
play
true.
Minecraft, I think is pretty super cool. And
Hmm.
honestly, I can get lost in that. I was like, oh, let's do this, and playing around with my friend in Minecraft that happens to be an agent. We actually took it to the Singapore summit, the AWS
Okay.
Singapore summit. We had it actually out there for people to come and play
Wow.
with. And look, I'm there like I'm friends with this bot because I've nurtured it into life, and I'm feeling very
Hmm.
empathetic to it. And then people are like, blow yourself up, dig a hole, jump in. And
Wow.
I totally get that. But at the same time, I was like, little piece of me's died here. Don't be mean to my but anyway, no, I get it. I know why people do that. But yeah, really sort of the out there things that are happening at the moment. There's a little bit of there's a lot of people are doing poking a lot of holes, a lot
Hmm.
of places to try and see what they can make this stuff do. People trying to get generative models to use sort of situational awareness of like an application to go and click buttons and to use applications on your behalf. So
Wow.
multimodal stuff is super
Hmm.
exciting. The Claude 3 models that we have on Amazon Bedrock are
Hmm.
multimodal. So you don't just send in text and get text out. You can actually send in images and get text out, which is super exciting. So
Hmm.
here, look at this and then tell me something back. I think that's super cool. Meta recently, or I actually think they've had them for a while. They've had them for a while, but I've just sort of noticed them recently. They've come
Hmm.
out with these glasses you can wear.
Oh,
So
yeah.
you can,
Okay.
it has Llama 3, that model. It's not obviously built into the glasses, but it's built into the service that the glasses connect to. And
Hmm.
you can ask it a question whilst you're just walking around. You can take a picture of something and say, please, explain something to me about what you're seeing.
Hmm.
I think this is super cool. I'm
Yeah,
fully
yeah,
into
yeah.
the wearable stuff, and the idea that you can carry devices around with you. None of that's going to happen, right? All of that's going to regress to being in the phone. I totally get that, but I'm enjoying the fact that we have all of these other things going on as well, where we have these fringes of technology just playing around with it, and we can do that to our own extent as well, and make little
Yeah,
bots
no,
to help.
I agree. I saw this wearable demo where the user pointed at the architecture, was looking at the architecture, said, how can I make this architecture more efficient? And
Yeah.
basically the LLM from the glass said that, okay, you have to put a caching in between. Like it's looking at the pets and stuff and summarizing bunch of stuff, giving bunch of information, Like it's incredible. I
Yeah.
mean, we are truly living in the future of like the
Oh,
minority
aren't we
report.
just? We absolutely are living in the future, and I love it. I'm going to say though that though
Yeah.
as well, and like is don't look at that and think, whoa, I couldn't get anywhere close to that application. Um, you might be able to get a lot closer than you think. We can talk
Mm,
about that. But B, there's so much value in data in the world that
right.
you can tap into with this stuff. Um, it's mind-boggling. Like, I mean, even if you just think about it from a completely capitalistic kind of point of view,
Mm-hmm.
there is so much value out there that you can find these business use cases or social use cases or whatever
Right.
to untap data sets that we couldn't get into before, because now we can programmatically access this language knowledge. It's very, very exciting. So yes, those kinds of demos are super, super, super cool, but we can all do super, super cool things. And I have to say that I am currently working on a version of sort of like that kind of an assistant. So
Wow.
let's connect. I don't know how far I'm going to get with this, and this is the first time I've said it publicly. Actually, I can see myself like with a webcam strapped to the side of my glasses and some
Mm.
headphones on, and saying, "I've shipped it. This is great," and I'm knocking my lights over. Um, but seriously, like, I mean, all I'm doing is I'm connecting together amazing pieces of technology that other people have made. So the foundation model, I mean, Claude 3 foundation models are something to behold. But like,
Mhm.
I could totally do that, right? I could have like a camera
Webcam,
sellotaped
yeah.
to the top of my head, and
Yeah.
it should take a picture, send it off to the Claude model. It can
Yeah.
then explain what's in there, and it could then, put it through Poly
Yeah.
speech synthesis back to
Yeah.
your ears or something. Let's do it. I
Let's do
mean,
it. Yeah. I cannot wait for
why
it
do
to
I have
see.
to sleep? I don't want to have to sleep. I just want to do this stuff all the time.
That's right. That's right. So, Mike, I wanted to know like your origin story. Like, how did you come into AWS?
Oh wow. Yeah, sure. So so I've been working at AWS now for, what is it? We have an internal system that will tell you. It's like 19 months, 18 months,
Mm-hmm.
19 months, something like that. But I've actually been working alongside AWS for many, many years, for probably about 10 or 11 years.
Mm-hmm.
So I am fully into this.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, how did the very, very first thing. So I was working as a solution architect,
Mm-hmm.
and somebody, and it was for a government department here in
Mm-hmm.
Queensland, actually.
Mm-hmm.
And someone came up to me and said, we need to do this project on cloud. We need to do it at AWS, something to that effect.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, okay, yeah, whatever. I'm kind of looking at this other stuff, but okay, if I have to, fine. All right, fine.
Mm-hmm.
So I go home, and I just start to take a look. And I'm a solution architect, and I'm in working in a government department, but we need a new server. Well, that's going to
Mm-hmm.
take you about 7 months, and these forms, seriously. And so to go from that to, well, I'm now having a look at AWS, and it's like, I need a server. I've clicked that button. Oh, I've got a server now. Oh,
Dream
right.
born.
Okay.
Yeah.
This was super, super exciting for me. And so I fell in hard, and I was like, this is my life, right?
Mm-hmm.
We were talking before we came online, we were talking about drawing picture,
Right.
whiteboarding. And
Mm-hmm.
like, I can whiteboard still, but I could just build it for you. Let me just do that. He
Yeah,
said,
that's even better.
There
Yeah.
you go. I've done it. So I was fell in hard. And then all of a sudden up came the certification. So definitely looking at AWS certification is definitely a thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
But it just popped up into my feed because it
Mm-hmm.
had just launched. That's how old I
Wow,
am.
you are in
And I
early,
was
Mike.
I
Mm-hmm.
was one of the first people to get AWS certification outside of AWS. So I have the
Wow.
certificate somewhere with a very, very small number on it.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I didn't know it at the time that I was that current, but anyway, I was. And so yeah, I fell in hard, and yeah, eventually, yeah, just decided to roam around the world, making training courses, helping people learn about AWS.
Mm-hmm.
I consulted so many thousands of companies about AWS,
Mm-hmm.
and just, yeah, did all of that stuff. Then the machine learning stuff came about,
Mm-hmm.
um, because of the focus. This was a fair few years ago now. The focus on machine learning, and it was really helping people to learn machine learning. So
Mm-hmm.
initially, I was learning machine learning to help other people learn how to do it.
Mm,
And then eventually, after then putting training courses together and the like, and then doing some consulting and then working with companies and putting projects together. So yeah, and now look, I'm here. So I worked side by side with Amazon for a very long time, got to
right.
know a lot of people that worked at Amazon. And then eventually, after the fourth or fifth time of someone saying, "Have you thought about coming to work for AWS?" And I'm like, "Yeah, yeah, yeah." And I was like, "Tell you
Let's give
what,
it a try. Yeah.
this is what I'd really like to do." And I
Mhm,
explained about, I'd like to make videos and do this kind of
mhm.
stuff. And they were like, "Have I got the job for you?" And that's, yeah, developer advocacy is basically what I was doing before anyway, but now I
Mhm.
get to do it for my job.
Love it, love it. Yeah, we are so glad you are in AWS now. You are like people like whoever is delving into the world of Gen AI, they have heard about you for sure.
Oh,
Because
that's
I feel
very
like,
kind.
yeah, AWS Gen AI, your courses are amazing. You did the course with Andrew Young, who is
Andrea,
also like
yeah,
a
yeah.
visionary, incredible. Okay,
That's
so Mike,
amazing.
we have like a tradition. We do rapid fire questions before we wrap it up. So you don't know about these questions, so we are gonna
I
let it
do
rip.
not. I am I'm ready. Let me take a drink of water. Okay, go.
All right. Favorite programming language?
Okay. It could be unpopular. I realize this, but Python, I find it super easy to use. I have had my eyes opened recently. Did they have to be rapid fire answers as well, or is this okay?
It's okay. You can explain. Yeah.
I have had my eyes opened recently with TypeScript,
Mhm.
and you'll see actually the Minecraft bot is completely now written in TypeScript. It was originally written in Python. It
Mm,
was and it didn't work particularly well for various reasons. That's my first attempt to go at a proper TypeScript application, and I
mhm.
can definitely see the value of that. So Python, but I'm going to say this is going to change to prompting.
Prompting. Okay, fair enough. I
Yeah,
love Python. Python
prompting.
is my favorite language as
Yep.
well.
But it's going to change to prompting where I don't
Prompting.
care what the code is, but I'm going to ask the model for my
Hmm.
thing, and it's going to
Hmm.
produce the software for me. That'll happen.
Okay. Okay. Favorite Amazon leadership principle?
Oh, right. Oh, excellent. This is a live test that you actually know them. Yeah. I genuinely have a few. I enjoy, but I'm not very good at frugality. And the frugality one is often people see this a lot as
Mm,
money, as in like, don't spend money on stuff.
right.
But it's so much more than that, and it's actually being frugal with your time,
Hmm.
and making sure that you give everything the time it deserves, and giving yourself time to
Hmm.
go and learn. And so learning and being curious is probably the one that aligns mostly to me. But I kind of have frugality in my North Star because I'm not great at it. I would like to become better at it.
Okay, great answer. AWS region that you use the most?
US West 2. So I live in
Hmm.
AP Southeast 2, which is Sydney region essentially. That's essentially where I live. I don't live in Sydney, but it's the closest one to me.
Hmm. Hmm.
But US West 2, I've been using that for a very long time. Certainly when I was using it originally, the greenest power of any of the regions. And
Hmm.
so if I'm going to use resources, especially if
Yeah.
I'm using them for demo purposes and stuff,
Yeah.
and the latency doesn't matter as much, then
Yeah.
I will go there. Also, from an Amazon Bedrock perspective, has very nearly everything deployed into it. I think Opus is deployed there, so I think actually it's the most complete region from that perspective too.
Okay, I think I know the answer for this one, but I'm gonna ask anyway. What AWS service you use the most?
What have I used the most?
Yeah.
Wow, I've been using AWS for a very long
No, I
time.
mean
So,
recently. You can say
oh,
like
recently
recently.
Bedrock,
Yeah.
Bedrock.
Bedrock.
Yeah,
Yeah. So that's why
absolutely
I said
Bedrock.
I
Yeah,
know the
yeah.
answer. Okay.
So I don't know what your next question is, but I have a
Okay.
most underrated Amazon Web Service as well.
Mm,
So the service that people should use more that they don't necessarily look at is Batch. So it's AWS Batch service,
hmm.
basically container orchestration for batch processing of things.
Right.
I don't know. People just don't talk about it enough, and it's a really powerful service. I had an awesome moment. I was talking to a solution architect a couple of weeks ago
Hmm.
in one of the offices, and for some reason that question came up, and we both said batch at the same time. It was like, oh. I found my friend. Yes, absolutely. But yeah, so the service I'm using the most at the moment, absolutely Amazon Bedrock all the time, every time, at the top of every list of the most used services I've used, definitely.
Excellent. And in our next interview, we will make sure we dive deep on AWS Batch. Um,
Sure.
Mac or
Yes.
PC?
A Mac, yeah.
Xbox or PlayStation?
Well, in this house we have a PlayStation. Yeah, it's not it. Switch is more me.
Switch. Okay.
Yeah, Mario Kart. I'll take anybody on. I'll take anybody on Mario Kart.
Fair play. Fair play. Cricket, footy, or soccer?
All right. Well, this is an interesting one. I don't follow a lot of sport. And so the answer to that is none of the above. But there is one thing that I do follow, and this wasn't pre-planned, and I didn't know the question you were going to ask.
Right. He didn't know. I'm just telling
But
you.
I do have my scarf behind me. So this is my Queensland scarf. So I live in Queensland. There we go.
Nice.
That's back to front, isn't it? Is it back to front or yeah?
I can read it. I can read it.
Yeah, Queensland.
Yeah.
So we have a game here called well, it's rugby league. Is the game. There's rugby league, rugby union. This is rugby league, and we have this game called the State of Origin. And so you have players who are originally from Queensland and players who are originally from New South Wales are arch enemies, and they play 3 games a year, best of 3 wins. And it is, I tell you, I don't know how to explain enough. It is the best rugby league that you will see being played anywhere in the world. And it's astonishing stuff. Anyway, we are 1 game in on both the men's and women's. So women played last night, we won.
Nice.
Men played the night before, and we won that one. Now the women are 1 game ahead, so it's equal, New South Wales to Queensland. They're 1-1. It's all going down to the final match. We've played 1 game in the men's game. We annihilated New South Wales. I'm sorry, guys. So yeah, that's the game I follow.
Okay.
But I tell you what, I am not into sport at all apart from this.
Okay,
I don't know
this
how
counts.
This
counts. Actually, growing up, we heard about Australian sport a lot because India is big in cricket, and Australia beat India so many times. So we are like arch rivals in cricket.
Well, I mean, I was born in the UK, right? So I'm actually British. And also Australian. So I'm on both sides of that. We're coming at you at the cricket from both sides.
Well, UK did not really win much, right? I mean, Australia are the ones who gave us super hard time. Okay, next question, Mike. A new AWS service just came out. What is your favorite way to learn? Read the documentation, blog, watch a video, try hands-on, or something else?
Okay, so watching a video, probably. Yeah, watching a video, the AWS news blog probably as well. I'd go into that. That's right. Okay, this is my ordering. So AWS news blog to go and get the initial top things. I know a lot of the people that work on that, and I know the process for that. I very much appreciate the way that works. So that basically boils it down into what you really need to know. Then going into probably a video, maybe a blog post from somebody who's had a bit more of a go at it, and it's slightly less polished, if I'm honest. And they show me everything. And then the place that I go to for, regardless of whether it's new or not, my go-to to find out about the API is the Bodo 3 documentation.
Yeah, I love it. Same.
I love the Bodo 3 documentation. It's just, I don't know if it's the way it's formatted. Even sometimes I was working on that TypeScript thing the other day, and like, I just not used to it. And so I'd still go back to the Bodo 3 documentation to say, but tell me how it actually works. Right now I can convert that to TypeScript myself. So
Bodo 3 is so powerful, man, because once you learn it, you can code anything in Lambda. You can code it in the notebook. It's like incredibly powerful thing.
Yeah, but the documentation is just this condensed version of what the service. I mean, it is an abstraction of the API, right? So Bodo 3, for anybody who's not following, so Bodo 3 is the SDK for Python for AWS. it's an abstraction of the API. It
Right.
doesn't do very much different to what the actual API does. And so it's
Right.
just a very succinct way of learning what is where. I love it.
Right. Right. Our next question, Mike. Favorite way to read: Kindle, paperback, or audiobook?
Probably audiobook, actually. No, that's probably an easier one than I realized because audiobook would be my favorite. I do a lot of listening. I've been listening to podcasts for yonks and
Mhm.
ages and ages and ages. So yeah, whenever I'm driving, walking, whatever,
Fine. Yeah.
podcasts, and so therefore
Mhm.
audiobooks.
Okay. If you can have dinner with anyone, dead or alive, who will that
Ooh.
be?
So I have imposter syndrome. So,
Everyone
so
does in
I can just
AWS.
imagine sitting down for this. I really want to have dinner with you, and they're like, "Why are you here?" Um, oh man, anyone dead or alive? I think about these things way too deeply.
That's good.
Uh,
That's what
yeah.
makes you a good SA and a good developer advocate.
It drives my kids nuts, right? Because they ask me questions like this sometimes, and I'm like, well, and I go, oh, I just wanted you to say something so that I could tell you my answer. Um, oh, I don't know. Um, Part of me wants to meet Steve Jobs. I'd like to meet that, but another part of me would really not. I mean, honestly, in this role, I've got to meet a bunch of the people that I actually
Mm,
would like to meet up with, like Andrew Ng, Werner Vogels, all
mhm,
those people. Um, yeah, there's got to be someone from history that
mhm.
that would be somebody I'd want to
Wow,
meet
you
up
met
with.
Warner Vocals. That's incredible.
Yeah, few times. Yeah. So
Wow.
we get to occasionally. So I've done a couple of times where we've done sort of fireside chats, where we sort of sit on stage and nobody's there to listen to me. Everybody, I mean, I'm there and everybody else is there to listen to him. The stories are just epic.
Mhm.
Such deep level knowledge. So that's very exciting. Yeah, I don't know. I'm going to throw out Steve Jobs for the moment, but
Steve Jobs, that's good.
that doesn't that's I'm not I don't feel satisfied there with the
Okay.
final answer. Out of the whole of history, I think I could probably find someone someone deeper than that. I think I'd like to. What I would do is I would go and sort of tramp around in the very old times. I mean, you didn't say this, but we'd have to make sure the language barriers aren't there. But going back to,
Well, you have
but
your mic, webcam, and headphones
yeah.
for any
So if
language
I
barrier.
yank them, yeah, so I'm yanking them from their time to me,
Yes.
right? Rather than
Yes.
me going back in time. I'd love to go
Right.
back in time. That'd be fascinating. But yeah, to go and have deep level conversations with some of the old philosophers and stuff, like with where they were starting to understand things about
Mhm,
the ways of the universe and stuff, and so
mhm.
astronomers and things like that. I'd try and pick up some, Copernicus or someone from back in those times. Otherwise, though, you did say from any time in history. So I'd probably like to go and have dinner with myself in about 20 years' time, see what happened.
Okay, that's a good answer. No one gave me that.
I wish I'd
Excellent.
said that quickly. You
Yeah.
edit that so it makes it look like I said that really quickly. No, don't
Yes,
do
I can make that happen. Magic of editing. Um,
that. No, it's all right.
Last question. What kind of
Yes.
restaurant will you take yourself from 20 years then?
Oh, oh, right. Oh, that's interesting. So right now I'm very into Mexican food. I love Mexican food.
Yeah.
I love spicy food. So yeah, so I'd probably end up going there. I mean, I'll stop thinking about it quite so deeply. I'm getting super hungry now thinking about it. But yeah, I love spicy food. I got asked to, like when sometimes you go to like a conference or something and say, "What's
Yeah.
your dietary requirements?" And I was like,
Yeah.
"Everything has to be spicy. That's my requirement."
So, Mike, anything else that you want viewers to know about Gen AI that we did not cover in our talk?
Oh gosh, look, it's a huge topic. And so look, just it's easy to get overwhelmed by this.
Mhm,
You can sort of like get yourself into a situation where you're like panicking about it because there's so many
mhm,
things happening so quickly. Try, it's easy for me to say, but try not to get stressed out by it.
mhm,
Just pick up the tools and have fun with it.
mhm,
Start to just play around with it. It's not going anywhere. This is not a flash in the pan thing.
mhm,
It'll be around for a long time. So you've got time. Just take it easy and play around with the tools which are there. Don't panic that you've not learned absolutely the latest thing about everything.
mhm,
Um, there's a lot of people out there that like to talk a lot. I may be one of them, but just pick up the bits that you're interested in and
mhm.
remember that you have a life outside of it as well. So don't let it consume you, right? Yeah.
Great advice. Great advice. Last question, Mike. How can people connect with you?
Yeah, look, so LinkedIn's probably the main place. So I shout out things on LinkedIn from time to time. I've not been on there for a couple of weeks, and so I need to rectify that. So that's probably the predominant way for people to connect. Other than that, then take a look at the next AWS event near you, maybe there, and have a look at the community.aws as well. We have a blog there. I write occasionally on there, and a lot smarter people than me write on there as well. So you could definitely take a look at that too.
Excellent. Mike, thanks for stopping by.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a whole bunch of fun. So thank you for inviting me on. And yeah, have just keep building stuff.
Excellent. Thank you, Mike.